everyone. I'm Linda Nickell, and welcome to the Happiness Hour. Tonight, my guest is Michael Wight. Wight. Michael's passion for capturing the wild and wonderful moments nature has to offer motivates him to get out as often as possible. He's got a great eye for storytelling through his photography, and his work really makes you stop and appreciate the little moments we might otherwise overlook. Michael's all about exploring the world with curiosity, engaging with the natural world in a way that feels both thoughtful and joyful, and bringing back images that make you smile, wonder, or just take a breath. In tonight's presentation, Freedom Framed: How Constraints Enable Creativity. Through a series of wildlife images, Michael will talk about how constraints force meaningful choices that shape how a photograph is experienced. And by using photography as an act of interpretation, imperfection creates room for intention, style, and creativity. You can connect with Michael through his website at wildlifebro.com. And if you're on Instagram, look for him at Wight Wildlife. Michael, welcome to the Happiness Hour.
Thanks, Linda. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
And thank you all for coming. This is awesome. I am going to go ahead and share my screen, and I'm going to dive right in.
I can, so you're in good shape. Thank you.
All right, yeah. One person is good. Okay, and let's make sure it works here. So like Linda said, Freedom Framed: How Constraints Enable Creativity, and a little bit about myself here. So I call myself an amateur wildlife photographer because I don't make money on my photography. It is something I do for fun, and I have a lot of fun doing it. My job, I'm an engineering program manager in software development, and it's kind of given me a bit of a superpower because I'm able to work remotely, and it gives me a lot of special opportunities to get around and spend some more time in the woods and with wildlife. I am originally from Southwest Florida, Fort Myers, Florida. And I grew up hunting and fishing and watching The Crocodile Hunter in my spare time. And I've just always loved animals in particular and the outdoors in general. I moved to Texas in 2019, South Austin, Texas. And then 5 years ago, I got my first DSLR. It was a Canon 90D. And I started taking what felt like real photos at the time. And I think my favorite things to shoot are just predators in general, predators of all kinds. I like raptors a lot, mammals like canines, felines, reptiles, insects, and then maybe this summer I'll finally get some pictures of fish because I got a pretty nice underwater thing. And I'm going to dive right in here. I think I want to start by talking about what the perfect camera might look like, because if you've ever had gas or gear acquisition syndrome, you know what it's like to wish you had something maybe a little more powerful than what you've got. Maybe you've got a problem that you're trying to solve. So let's just say you have all the money in the world and you can get the perfect camera, maybe one that doesn't even exist. What would that camera even have? It's got to have big pixels, and it's got to have lots and lots of them. That way you don't have any noise and you get all the little intricate details. And you got to have complete dynamic range from black to white, more so even than our eyes can see. You want like a crazy aperture from f0.01 to like f1 million, right? Because you want it to be able to capture every single kind of high sunny situation. You want to be able to point it right at the sun. You want to be able to take pictures in the middle of the night, and that's going to look kind of crazy, right? Because if you know anything about camera physics or what like a f4 500 millimeter lens, for example, looks like or feels like, or how heavy it is, just to give you an idea, a lens with that kind of aperture for a 35 millimeter lens that a lot of you might be familiar with, the aperture diameter for f0.01 would need to be 3,500 millimeters. That would be a massive, incredibly heavy lens. And for f1 million, you'd need a pinhole smaller than a particle. So if you had a 100 millimeter focal length lens, the aperture diameter would be something like 0.0001 millimeters, which is smaller than a bacterium. That's smaller than the wavelength of visible light. You'd want to be able to zoom from 0 millimeters to 1 million millimeters. Why not? You want a lens of that size would theoretically need to have an effective diameter of like 100 million millimeters, which is 100 kilometers or like 62 miles, right? So you need this massive, massive camera. And then lastly, of course, you'd want to have like 1/1 millionth of a second shutter speed too, right? Like 1 microsecond. You want to be super fast. They actually do make cameras that shoot that fast. They use them for observing like things like explosions and ballistic impacts. And so I figure, you also want to be able to get anywhere with it. So maybe we add some like drone maneuverability. Maybe you'd have the ultimate camera then. But would it create better photos? And what would it even look like, right? Probably look something like that, something crazy. And if you're thinking like, what is that, an AI generated image? Yes, it is, because I couldn't find a picture of the perfect camera. So I had to make one like this. This is going to be the only AI generated image in this presentation, every other photo I took myself. So let's talk a little bit maybe about that problem with perfection. The problem with perfection in the perfect camera, even if you could get it, is that the results would be sterile. The perfect gear would just produce carbon copies. You're talking, it would just be science, who could capture the most perfect subject in 3 dimensions down to the perfect detail. You're talking bioscans in wildlife photography. And that's just, it's sterile, it's dead, it's technically flawless, but creatively empty. And most importantly, it's not for you. It's not something that you want to capture. You find yourself maybe just again trying to scan or copy whatever it is that's already out there. So there is no perfect photo. Every photo is a compromise of constraints. And it's those constraints, I believe, that set us free. You have constraints all over the place, like the exposure triangle, the location that you're shooting in, the gear that you have. And there are lots and lots of others. I can't cover them all in 45 to 50 minutes, but I will cover a few that I think have been meaningful for me and that have helped me expand my skills and I think my creativity. And hopefully you find something in here that inspires you to maybe see a challenge in the future as an opportunity to do something a little different than you might have done otherwise. So first, obviously, I think exposure is something we all think about. You have to have light in order to capture a photograph. And here's an example of somewhere where I had terrible light. Anytime that you're shooting owls, at least most times, I guess, that you're shooting owls, you're going to have terrible light. And in this case, it had been raining and it was super cloudy and I just couldn't get any light to save my life. It was close to sunset. And I noticed that the clouds were kind of starting to thin out and I'd get these sort of waves where for a moment I'd get like just a little glimpse of light. And so I sat there and I rested my hand up against a tree and I rested my lens on my hand. And I thought, well, I'm shooting at like 1/20th of a second here, which is breaking the rules, and I will see what happens. I don't know. And I noticed, like, just as the light kind of started just as the cloud started to part and I got a little bit of light, so did the owl. And the owl looked up into the sky at the light that had just kind of hit it on the head, and boom, I got this really great photograph at like, I think it was 1/40th of a second. So I was able to speed up a little bit. And I was really happy with this photograph. It was one of the earliest owl photos that I have ever taken. And it felt like it had some emotion to it. And it's something that I wouldn't have gotten in great conditions. I had to have this perfect storm of terrible conditions in order to get this photograph. And similarly, I was shooting these armadillos at Lockhart State Park, and they just take over the cul-de-sac there at night. If you haven't had, like, if you're in Central Texas and you want good photos of an armadillo, I recommend going to Lockhart State Park around sunset. And I realized, like, I don't have enough light here to do really anything except lay on my stomach and hold the camera as still as I possibly can and just see what comes. And I was fortunate. This armadillo came up to me. It was very close to me, and it was just burying its face in the dirt, and it didn't really mind me much. And I did have some fill flash, so I was able to get a catch light in the eye, and it kind of showed off the scales a little bit. And I realized, like laying on the ground here was the right call. I mean, the ground is not only really stable and helped me in a low light situation, but it also happened to be the best angle. And it is often the best angle for critters because you want to be at eye level and it really blurs out your background. So that was a good decision and it gave me a beautiful photo. Another example of getting low and it helping me not only at night, but also to get a good angle was on this pika that was in Yellowstone. And my wife and I watched these pikas jump around on these rocks for hours. We started well before sunset and waited for them to show up. Wasn't actually, I think we were looking for marmots, and then the pikas showed up. Or marmots were out of season, I learned later. And these little guys are jumping around. They are really, really fun to watch. They're like a hamster and a rabbit, and it started getting dark, and my wife was getting antsy. I was getting antsy, and we're in Yellowstone. I think I had bear mace on me, but you start getting nervous about predators and stuff. And I was thinking like, okay, we ought to get out of here. And then these things started moving closer, and I was like, oh yeah, okay, all right, I can't go anywhere yet. And again, I realized like I cannot continue to brace my lens on my knees here. Like I just have to lay on my stomach and do what I can. And it's hard because they're jumping around on rocks kind of up above me. So getting an angle was tough. But this one came right down to the ground and peeked up over a rock. And I got a really fun photo that just makes this thing look larger than life to me. And it's got a lot of personality. And the light here was, again, very, very bad. I was very surprised to be able to get a photo like this, but I couldn't have gotten a photo like this in great light anyway. And one more example of terrible lighting. This was also at Yellowstone, and this was at Mammoth Springs, where it's a pretty good place to see elk in Yellowstone. I think they were there every time we passed through. And shooting them during the day is fun enough. But it started to get dark on this day, and we just stuck around and continued to watch them. I figured, I'm not going to keep shooting. There's no point. I don't have any light left. But then this moose went to cross the road in front of a car, and the car had to sit there because what else are you going to? I said moose. This elk crossed the road in front of the car, and you don't drive through an elk. You just kind of sit there and you got to wait for the elk to decide that it's time to move. And I realized like, hey, this thing's like actually lit up really well. And so I lifted my lens back up and I took another photo. And I really liked this photo. I thought it was fun and it was unique. And not everybody has a car lit photo of an elk. And it wasn't my car, so I didn't feel like I'd done anything ethically wrong or anything like that. I wasn't trying to harass the animal. I just was there when it happened. And so, boom, I got a photo, and it was something a little bit different, not the typical elk photo that I had seen on the internet a million times. So another constraint is dynamic range. And dynamic range, if you're not super familiar, is basically the range from dark to light. Our eyes can see a really broad dynamic range compared to cameras. When we're shooting with cameras, we have to choose, like, are we going to get the lighter portion of this scene, or are we going to get the darker portion of this scene? Because in many cases, you're not going to get all of it, especially if there are harsh shadows or bright highlights. And so here are some situations where dynamic range was a challenge for me. This one, I just had this little mantid fly. It looks like a mantis. I learned later it was a mantid fly. I hope Todd is proud of me here. And it was really cute. I mean, this thing is like, it looks savage and cute at the same time. And I'm trying to find a way to shoot it. And I was laying on my back. So I was kind of shooting up at it like this, just laying on the sidewalk at my house. And it was on this indigo spires plant, and it was bright, broad daylight. So there was no hope of getting these nice green leaves in there with the bug. And so later on, I had to figure out, like, okay, how do I make this photo work? And black and white ended up being fantastic. And I learned that black and white can really do some special stuff, especially when you have high contrast situations. So that worked for this photo. And I think that also the really shallow depth of field made it fun because you just have your eyes are brought, right to this little thing's face here. Um, I also had this one here of a willet. This was on, I think, Bonita Beach in Florida. And I like this photo because it almost looks like the willets in snow. I think I said that when I posted it online. Who knows when? And this is sand, and it's a bright sunny day. I know we love to shoot at golden hour, just before sunset or just after sunrise. And this wasn't one of those situations. It was bright, broad daylight, but I had my camera and I wasn't going to be deterred. And I love willets. So this thing was walking around and I was laying on my belly and I got this shot, which again, the blown out white at the time, I thought, well, not technically perfect. I don't necessarily have my background here, but white ended up being a good background for this photo, in my opinion. I enjoyed it and I like the look of it. And I think it really kind of makes the willet pop off the photo. And it's not obvious immediately what's going on here, that this is sand, unless you're familiar with shooting birds on the beach. Another challenge here with dynamic range. So this is a stretch spider at the Wildflower Center here in Central Texas. And it was like over this little pond that they have. And I looked down on it and I'm trying to take a picture of it. And it was just impossible, I thought, to get the water behind it. So I stopped way. I think I cranked my shutter speed just way up. I had already brought my ISO all the way down. I was like, okay, well, we'll see what we can do here. And I got this photo, which I ended up loving. I got just some bokeh balls off of the water, so you almost wouldn't even know that there was any real reflective surface behind it if I hadn't done that. That's just the sun reflecting off of the water, and then the sun reflecting off of the spider, which is also a kind of unique spider. I mean, stretch spiders look a little different, and usually when you see them, they're like this. They're kind of stretched out over the water and almost look like they're part of the web. But this photo is cool. It actually looks kind of like cracked glass to me. When I stand back, it looks like somebody tried to throw a baseball at my screen. And I just think it's cool. I like images that look like something they're not. I like when you look at a photo and you think it's something, and then you look a little closer and you realize that it's something else. That's fun to me. And it's hard to capture those, and it's hard to plan those. This is a photo that I took at Onion Creek. I've taken a lot of photos at Onion Creek because I lived close to it in South Austin, and I spent a ton of time there after I got my first camera. I don't love this photo. I took this photo and I tried to rescue this photo, and I did a whole bunch of stuff. This buck was just in the dark pretty much, and the bright sun was lighting up everything behind it, and it just seemed like an impossible photo to do anything with. And I thought, whatever, I'll make it a black and white and play around with it. So I was playing around with it, and I ended up with this look that I liked in a way. I was like, it's weird, but it's got sort of like a bit of a mystery to it. And it's really dark and it's contrasty. And so I shared it online, unlike a lot of other photos that I decided, no, I don't want to embarrass myself. So I just shared it on the internet. And nothing really came of it. I probably got a few likes, whatever. But months later, I was talking to my mom and her fiance, and they're very kind and supportive of this hobby of mine. And I told them, I will print you a photo anytime. If you want a photo, I'll print it and you can have it. And my mom's fiance said he wanted this photo specifically. He said, this photo almost made me cry when I first saw it, because it brought back a memory of when he was a kid, this particular moment of him and his dad, who he's very close with. And I was like, moved. I'm like, I had no idea that a photo that I thought was honestly a throwaway photo, and I shared it in a what the heck kind of moment. And it's cool that it connected with somebody. So that was a big eye opener for me. I'm sure we all have photos that we don't share because we're embarrassed, but we think, I don't know, there's something there. I don't know what it is. I feel like I want to share it, but I'm not sure why. Just share it. Just do it. It's fine. And you might be surprised who you connect with. And this definitely isn't the only photo that I was uncertain about sharing, and then later was surprised to find that it really connected with somebody. Another one here, just to talk about low-key situations. So maybe I should warn people. I don't know, some people are afraid of spiders. This is a spider. It's the only spider. So close your eyes if you don't like spiders, and then after that, you don't have to worry about it. I lied. There was another spider before. I think this is the last spider. So this is a wolf spider. This was in my backyard in South Austin. I was laying down on the little concrete slab in my backyard, and I was taking pictures of critters in the glass and this in the grass. And this was a very large wolf spider. And I was working with a little light cube. I didn't have a flash, I had a cube. And man, was I happy with this photo when I got it. I was working with intense limitations. Like I had no idea what I was doing with macro. I had no idea what I was doing with flash, shooting at night, and it was all just practice. And when I got this photo, though, I was like, this is freaking awesome, right? It looks like it's coming kind of like out of the shadows. It looks like both scary but also kind of beautiful, depending on your feelings about spiders. And I like the ribbons of grass coming up around it. And I mean, if you shoot wildlife, shooting wildlife in the grass is often really boring, especially like birds. You shoot birds in the grass, it feels like, ow, whatever, you know. But this is a really cool shot of an animal in the grass. At least I thought so. And just a good example of how, you know, you don't, I know that there's a lot of value in planning and being in the right place at the right time. And I can talk more about that later too. But a lot of cool things happen on accident, and you really just have to try to be there and try and have some fun, and you'll surprise yourself. One last photo here to talk about contrast and dynamic range. So I just liked this photo. These were big harvester ants out at oh goodness, this was near Hornsby Bend. And harvester ants are cool. They're a native ant in Texas, and they're called harvester ants because they don't like eat things. They don't kill other animals or eat dead stuff. They actually collect plant material, bring it into their nest, and they grow mold on it. They eat the mold. So they're farmers. And so I think they're a cool ant. And I'm like looking at them, and I have a not macro lens, you know, and I have a telephoto because I'm there looking for birds. Like, what do I even do with this, you know? And so I took a whole bunch of photos of them. But this was one that I really liked. I liked the transition from dark to light. This was a very cold day, and all of the ants that were in the sun were moving around and pretty active. And the ones that were in the shaded area right here as the sun was going down had all kind of like frozen in motion. And it just kind of caught my attention. And I took the photo and ended up liking it. It also reminds me of an album cover of like an emo band I listened to when I was a teenager. So it's sort of that personal connection. You see something that it's not exactly what the photo is, but it brings something to mind that gives you an emotional response. And I think that is one of the most important things about photography or art in general. So let's talk about another one. How about that? Focal length and distance. All right. And that gives you some opportunities for things like small in frame shots and also close up opportunities like macro shots. This is an example of a small in frame shot. I really love scissor-tailed flycatchers. When I moved to Texas, I thought they're like the coolest bird. And I've tried to get really great photos of them flying. I think I've got some okay ones, but this is one of my favorite scissor-tailed flycatcher photos, and it's not super close up, and it's not a fantastic portrait. I was pretty far away from this bird. What I liked about it, though, was just how it brought in the colors of the sort of like brownish grass in the background, and it almost like fits right in with the bird. I think the color palette of this image really spoke to me, and I liked that about the image. And I realized that these small in frame photos give you a lot of opportunity to bring in some of the environment, some of just the space that your animal or your subject is living in or existing in. And sometimes it results in an image that means something to you. I also got this one just to push to the extreme here a little bit. This is a painted bunting that hopped up in the grass just as it was just after sunrise, and I was sitting on this little grassy hill, and I heard a little rustling behind me. And so I turned around and up the hill a little ways with this painted bunting. I think it was just looking for little seeds on these like dead-ish flowers. And I realized that, you know, small in frame subjects, just like I told you, and I'll repeat it again, I like images that aren't what you expect. This one, to me, it confuses the sense of scale a bit. You know, it makes this bird look like a bug at first, and then you look closer and oh wow, that's a bird. I thought that was like a little bug in the grass. I like that. I like that effect, and we'll push it even further. That's an owl on a branch. And nobody wants, when you're shooting owls, to get an owl that far away, right? Like you want to get close if you can get close. But I liked this photo. I like this photo almost not really because of the owl, but because of the tree. The tree looks like it's like a 500-foot tall tree. I don't know. I don't know how that sense of, scale came into this photograph, but I ended up liking the effect. And so I kept the photo. I deleted most of the photos of this owl, but I kept this one. And I don't think you have to get right up close to every subject for it to result in a neat photo and a neat result. Well, let's go to the other extreme and talk about getting really close to stuff. I was looking at my grasshopper photos trying to find this one, and I'll use this as a moment to plug tagging your photos, because had I not spent the effort tagging photos every time I take them, I wouldn't have found this photo or some of the other ones to prepare for this presentation. So I highly recommend it. This one was tagged as like grasshopper, insecta, wildlife. So I can find it like a few ways. But I like this photo. I was really close, really, really close. And I had a macro lens. And something that macro photographers, I know there are a few here, will do when you're trying to get an insect in focus is something like a focus stack. So you'll take a lot of photos and you'll basically focus at the closest sharp point that you want all the way through to the furthest sharp point that you want. And then you'll make a composite of those photos in post. And I think those shots are beautiful. I am also very lazy when it comes to post-production. And so the effort that goes into making those focus stacks, like, I commend you in this room, those who do it. It is a lot of work to do that, and I needed to find another way. So post-processing is also a constraint, and in this case, I opted to go for very shallow depth of field, and I often do that with macro photography, and I've fallen in love with that look in macro photography, and it's become a bit of my own style. So I like this look where I have sort of this little pinpoint of in focus stuff. And you saw that before with that manted fly, and you see it here again. And it's almost like you aren't exactly sure what the background is. It looks like maybe a leaf or a bit of grass that this little grasshopper nymph was on. And I just like how my eyes are drawn to just the specific little details of this head and this little foot. And this is fun. Even though I had a super shallow depth of field, I got a cool shot that I really liked. And another example of that would be this, was that a California digger bee. And that was, again, landing in my garden, which, if you like taking photos of bugs and stuff, I highly recommend planting yourself a little pollinator garden, because you'll have infinite subjects all the time, at least when it's not freezing cold. And this is another shot that just worked for me. I was using a lot of manual focus with focus peaking. I learned at least that my Canon R7 didn't play nicely with autofocus and my Sigma macro lens, and I got better results just manually focusing. This is just another cool example of a nice in-focus face, and everything else is out. And I should probably pick up the pace. I got a lot of photos to talk about here. Okay, here's another example. This is a little lizard. This was in Dallas, and it was at their botanical garden. I just love this little thing. It came out on a flower, and I did not have a macro lens. I had a 100 to 400 lens that I was able to travel with, and I got what was almost a macro shot. This is a really cool photo for me. I just like the colors. I like what seems like emotion in animals, when they make, I like little ponderous looks that animals give. I just like that look. And it's also become a bit of style that I think I've incorporated overall in my work. So beautiful photo, and not something that I could have gotten with a macro lens or with one of my big, nice prime lens. I had to have this sort of budget level travel lens that I had with me to even get this shot in the first place. And one more great example of getting up close and personal. I was on my way home. I was in the passenger seat. My wife was driving. She saw these armadillos. These were baby armadillos. Baby armadillos are always in groups of 4. And so there were 4 of them. And they were in the grass in our neighborhood. And all I had on me was a 30 millimeter lens. I had brought it to the bar with us. We went out with the dogs. I was just trying to take some pictures of the dogs. We had a puppy. And I got out of the car because I figured, what the heck, I'll try to get a photo with whatever I've got anyway. This is cool. And I knelt down and I thought these things would scatter and run away, but they came right up to me because they're curious little babies and they don't know any better yet. And I had to scoot back. So I was like trying to scoot back. They're getting too close for me to focus, and I ended up getting some pretty neat shots. I love this one. I love the personality in that shot, and it's cute little things, you know? So those are some great opportunities, even when you don't have the right distance, even when you're a little too close or a little too far away. You can still make it work. Uh, More than just distance, you have to have good position photography. I think that it's annoying in a lot of cases to a lot of photographers when you have that little twig in the way, or you have some hair that gets in your subject's face, and you're always battling those physical barriers and trying to get the right position. But you don't always have to have the right position, and sometimes the little accidents really work for you. This was a hummingbird. This was again out at Onion Creek, and this is a buckeye flower, I think a Mexican buckeye. And I was trying to shoot this hummingbird, and it was flying all over the place. And I tried to get a shot of it as it came up to these flowers. And of course, I focused the flowers and not the bird. But I ended up loving the shot. It almost looks like biblical. It looks, like maybe like a fiery phoenix kind of shot. It looks really interesting to me, and it makes my mind start racing when I look at it. And I knew that's a cool shot, even though the bird is not in focus, which was the goal. And I missed the goal, but I ended up with something pretty neat anyway. Here's another example of a thing or two in the way. This is a lot of branches in the way. This makes me think of something like Hannibal Lecter, looks like this kind of like crazy bird wants to come at me, but he's behind bars and he can't get to me. It's got a kind of funny story and a little bit of attitude to it. And this is a good example of like, I see this all the time. Anytime I'm trying to shoot birds, all the time I see birds that are just behind a mess of branches. And I think like, there's no point. Why would I even bother? But sometimes I do bother, and sometimes I'm surprised by what comes out of it. And I like the results that come out of it. And this is just an example of that. When I was going to Wyoming, I wanted to get this like shot of a bison rolling around in the dust. And I realized in reflecting on it that what I wanted was the same shot that everybody else has gotten of the bison rolling around in the dust. And that's what I wanted. And so I was looking for that. And my wife knew that I was looking for that. And we're looking for those opportunities. And some opportunities came and went. And man, that moment goes by really fast when it happens. They'll give you maybe a little bit of a sign that they're going to do it, and then they do it. And in this case, I didn't get the moment that I wanted. It had just finished rolling in the dust. Two other bison walked in front of it, and then this is what I got. It was a cloud of dust in front of this big, burly male bull bison. And I love the shot. It was fantastic. I think that it's really interesting to me. It's almost a silhouette, and the cloud gives it a little bit of mystique. And I mean, this thing makes a cool background. I made this like a background in my work calls for a long time because I just thought it looked pretty neat. And it's not a shot that I've seen a million times online like those other ones that I was trying to emulate in the first place. So great opportunity when I thought I had actually missed an opportunity. And then another one here. This was a great egret in Florida. And it was just a bright, sunny day. And I was trying to find the right way to get a shot of these things. And there were just a mess of branches all over the place. They were all in this like beautiful kind of breeding plumage. And I'm like, come on, I got to get something here. And I ended up moving all over the place. I got in this position here, and I got this shot of an egret. And I was fortunate enough that there was shade over the bird, just enough shade. And there was some shade behind it, blocking reflections off of the water and the bright sunny day. And so I ended up with, this was over Christmas break, I got a pretty cool, almost Christmassy tree looking bokeh out of it. And that I thought was neat. And it reminds me of that Christmas trip when I look at this photo. So a special emotional connection. And something that I realized as I continued to not be deterred by things getting in the way in my photographs is that it's actually kind of a style that I like. And I've adopted this style and I use it a lot. And I actually enjoy when things get in the way. And now sometimes I even put things in the way on purpose. And this is a little prairie warbler in Florida. This is a turkey vulture flying over my own backyard. And you're like, oh, there's like little flares in there. Like, yeah, that's a leaf on my mesquite tree that I was shooting through. And it just kind of made a little bit of a flare and flash across the wings of the bird. And I like that. It makes it look a little different. It's a little more interesting than it just being a perfect turkey vulture on a white background, which you get when you're shooting birds in flight all the time. So it adds a little bit of extra visual interest. Here's another example of uh, a roadrunner. Here, this was at the Wildflower Center, and it was Roadrunner and Tree, which I didn't see, I think, ever before that. And it was hidden behind a lot of leaves, and I'm trying to move around, the bird's moving around, and I finally got this shot. And it would have been an otherwise kind of bland and dull shot had I not had these bright sunlit green leaves getting in the way. And it really, I think, set the shot off. I don't think it would have been as good of a photo, or I would have loved the photo the way I do had I not had some stuff in the way. And I could keep going with these examples because I love this look. This is a cardinal, bunch of leaves in the way. It was just eating some berries, and beautiful shot. This was tons of stuff in the way. If you looked at this without my telephoto lens, you'd hardly see the bird. But this ended up being a great shot that I really love. This was really recent, and these were some fall leaves here. This was just a great blue heron, and it was out on the stick. And again, heron on a stick, maybe cool, maybe a good shot. Heron on a stick with cool fall leaves in the way. That was nice. That came out pretty nice, and I liked the extra color that was in the shot, and I think it created some more visual interest. And then we go into winter when the leaves went away, but you still have these evergreens here. And of course, I've got all these little, what do we call these, scales on cedar trees, getting in the way of this beautiful house finch, one of my favorite little birds. And I just love red. I love red and I love yellow on the birds. And again, just there's stuff in the way, there's stuff swirling in the background, and I think it creates just a ton of visual interest. And so now I look for things to get in the way. And I'll kind of wrap up this section here with a quick story about this photo. This is a photo, one of the, I think it's the first photo that I got in the Hill Country Alliance calendar. And I love this shot. This shot I love because it's an owl in broad daylight, which I pretty much never get to see. And if I do get to see it, it's not easy to get a photo of it because they hang out way, way, way up in the trees where we can't see them during the day. And that's where this bird was. It looks like I'm a lot more on eye level with this bird than I was. I was actually pretty far away, and it was pretty high up in the tree. I had gone out with a friend in Onion Creek, and we're looking around and we're listening for these owls, and it was well before sunset. And I was recovering from knee surgery, and we were trying to crawl through some pretty nasty stuff, and I tore my leg open on some old nasty barbed wire that was in the ground. And we're sitting underneath this tree because we could hear the owl, but we couldn't see the owl, and it's just greenery everywhere. Finally, my friend spotted the owl, and I was able to move up the hill a little bit until I could just see it through a pinhole. I mean, I was shooting through lots and lots of greenery, and I could just barely see the owl with my eyes. And when I'd look through the camera, I got this view, and I thought, wow, that's incredible. And I got this shot. This is hardly cropped at all. I think it's cropped for position a little bit, but just a wonderful shot and a beautiful photo, and something that I wouldn't have gotten had I not had the patience to stick around, a little bit of perseverance to trudge through some kind of crappy forestry situation stuff, and tried to reposition myself just so that I could get a glimpse. You don't need much if you're shooting wildlife. You don't need a whole lot. You just need a glimpse, and you can get some pretty cool shots. Moving into shutter speed here, another constraint that's really common that is going to create opportunities for motion and blur. And I have a few examples here of how I've encountered those challenges. So this was a sandhill crane in Florida, and I had a ton of perfect, what I would call technically perfect shots of this bird. Even though the sun was going down, I was able to kind of handhold pretty well, and I was shooting with a pretty nice lens. And this bird was just coming in nice and slow. So I got great shot, great shot, great shot. And then it started jumping around and doing this weird dancing thing. And that was when the real challenge started, because now I've got motion and I've got low light and I'm shooting a slow shutter speed. But I got a little bit of motion in the wings, which I like, because this was a very high motion moment. I mean, this bird was jumping 3 feet in the air. I didn't know that sandhill cranes did this, so I had to go learn about the behavior later too, because like, what did I just see? This thing was jumping up and down like a pogo stick and making all sorts of crazy noise, if you know what sandhill cranes sound like. So again, beautiful, wonderful photo. And had I had much higher shutter speed and much better light, I probably would have been able to freeze the subject perfectly, and I probably wouldn't have gotten the kind of motion in this shot that I was able to get in the end. So another example of just the constraint actually working in my favor. And this is just a challenge that I was proud to overcome. I mean, the constraint with shooting swallows is that they are just really, really hard to get in flight. They move very quickly, they're very small, and they don't always come very close. And I had tried in my backyard for a very long time. This bird was not in my backyard, and I can't even remember where I was, except for that I was sitting at the edge of a pond and I could see these swallows flying, chasing bugs over the front of this pond. And I sat there for an hour and I took 3,000 photos, and I had 3 keepers at the end of it. And this is one of them. It's a lesson for me in perseverance. And I think that had I, given up and walked away, I never would have known that this was possible. Now, if I want to shoot something like a heron flying by, I feel like it's almost like I can rely on my muscle memory. It's like throwing a football. I mean, I can get the lens to my eye really quickly, and I can get the bird in focus very quickly. And I attribute some of that skill to the fact that I sat there for an hour and I took 3,000 photos of something that was impossible to shoot, and I got a couple shots. And dragonflies are similar if you want to practice with something that's easier to find. Just an example here of a terrible photo that I like. So this is a bird taking off from a branch, and anybody who shoots wildlife has a lot of these photos or has taken a lot of these photos, because you're shooting the bird and then the bird takes off and you get this weird blurry mess. Some of those I end up really liking, especially if it's a colorful bird. I like things that look like just you streaked paint across the sensor. And this is just one example. I have lots and lots of them, and I never share them, but I thought it was cool to share as a part of this presentation. I have a rule for myself when I'm culling photographs that if it makes me stop for a second, think, I don't know, should I? The answer is yes. I should always keep it if I feel that way. Just something funny about motion here. I mean, this little bird, I think this is an orange-crowned warbler. And this series of 3 photos, you'll notice the bird switches position, like it turns its lower body, but its head hardly moves. And I caught that transition. It did a little hop on the branch. You see it turn its body. Just hilarious. Birds are really funny, and their motor mechanics are really interesting. And in this case, I had the ability to capture it because if you notice the sun hitting this bird right here, it was blown out. So I had to crank my shutter speed up just to get the bird not blown out. And because I had really high shutter speed, I was able to capture this transition in a way that I wouldn't have if I was shooting the way I shot all the other birds that day, which is about, half of the shutter speed I was shooting at here. So just a neat kind of thing that happened, and something I wouldn't have gotten had I not faced that constraint of bright light and needing to raise my shutter speed. We're getting into, how are we on time? We're looking 8:16. So I've got about 15 minutes, right? And we're about 3/4. We're doing well.
You're fine.
Okay.
You're fine.
Cool. The frame. So you are also constrained to what you can fit on the sensor. I mean, you see, and everybody here, I think, has at least tried to shoot a sunset. If you have a camera, there's no way you can avoid at least trying to shoot a sunset at some point, and your photo just never matches up. I think I have a couple sunset photos that I'm proud of that I think are really pretty. And no matter how pretty of a sunset photo I've gotten, I always thought the real thing was better, and I wished I could have shared that. But there are some opportunities. I talked earlier about focus stacking as one thing that you can do with composite pictures, but panoramas are another example. And this was another situation in Wyoming where I am looking for those bison rolling in the dust. And I'm like, just one of you do the thing. And they were too far away anyway in this case. So I'm sitting there and I'm thinking like, okay, I took maybe, 50 shots and I wasn't really happy with any of them. I'm like, I don't know, there's not really any story here. But then I'd take the camera down and I'm like, but this looks so cool. And I put the camera up and I'm like, but I can't get it. And I don't know how to show that. And so I handheld and I just sprayed across in front of me, and I took maybe like 40 frames I just shot that way. And then later on, I took and I stitched those pictures together in post, and I loved it. I thought, this is awesome. I love the way that this photo turned out. And I think that for a composite, it really captures what I was seeing in the moment. And this is one of the rare times where I feel like I could say, like, yeah, that's what it was like. Like, I was sitting there and that's what it was like. It was huge. And there were so many of them, and they were just all over the place. And there's beautiful mountains in the background. So there's still an opportunity even to break outside the boundaries of the frame, and you just have to get a little bit creative. And here's another one that I don't see very often, which is a vertical panorama. And another picture that I have seen, or at least I've taken a lot of times, is a kestrel at the top of a tree. They love to hang out up there at the little tippy tops. And they're also kind of skittish, at least in my experience. So it's hard for me to get close to kestrels. So they're sitting up there at the top of the tree, and I'm trying to get photos of them. And so I have all of these like terrible atmospheric, blurry pictures of these little kestrels at the top of trees. And on this day, I got plenty more of those. And then I thought, come on, like, can we try something a little bit different? I've got beautiful Lake Somerville in the background, but the bird is like way, way, way up there, and the lake is way, way, way down there. And there's no hope of me getting 50 feet in the air right now. So how do we make this work? And the way I made it work is I did the same thing I did with those buffalo, but straight up and down. And I just took a vertical panorama, starting with the bird. I took about 20 shots from top to bottom. I think I used maybe 4 or 5 of them to make this composite. And again, another shot that I was really happy with. I was happy with the results. It's a tiny in-frame bird. You almost don't even notice that there's a bird in the photo unless I tell you there is. And it's got the beautiful Lake Somerville in the background, a nice kind of color gradient transition, and the trees are kind of making like a cool swoop across it. It's just a visually intriguing image to me, and I like the result. And it's just not the average photo of a kestrel. It's not like a portrait, a perfect portrait, and it's not some crummy, blurry, atmospheric photo that I have a lot of either. It's something a little different, and I think that that's what makes it a little special. Something else that your gear can't do for you, it can't tell the stories, so it doesn't matter how strong your gear is. It's not going to tell the story for you. You have to be there at the right time, and you have to catch the stuff happening, and you have to be very curious. And some examples of that, I do love hummingbirds, and I was trying to shoot this hummingbird as it was flying around this cedar tree, which was unusual to me because I'm used to hummingbirds visiting nectar, and I don't know what it was doing here. At least I didn't at the time. And I had to research later to figure out what I had captured. And what I captured here, if you look very closely at this photo, you go right up against your screen, you'll see the little spider webs up in there. The hummingbird was collecting spider webs to build a nest. And that's something that hummingbirds do. I didn't know that they do until after I took this photo. I thought that was really cool, and I caught that behavior, and that's a fun story. And how do you set out and plan to capture a hummingbird collecting spider webs? Like, I didn't have a plan to do that. And I don't even know if I wanted to do that, how I would do that, but I have done that, and I did it on accident. It was because I just saw a hummingbird flying around. I thought, well, we'll give it a shot. I know there's no flowers, and it's hard to get a hummingbird to stay still for you, but this worked, and I was really proud of it. We were visiting Arizona, my wife and I, and this was a fun moment because we were trying to get out of the out of the botanical garden, and we had a flight to catch. We were getting ready to go home, and so I had already pushed it as long as I could without leaving that place. And so we were like, okay, now we're booking it out. We're booking it out, and we see this great egret stalking something. I think my wife spotted it first. And we just couldn't tell what it was looking for. I mean, we've all seen, if you've shot birds, you've seen egrets kind of stalk fish in the water. But we're in the desert, and what is the egret doing here in the first place? And then I realized I saw the lizard, and people started to kind of stop because we were sitting there watching, and I had a big camera. Big cameras attract attention. And so people stopped to see what I was looking at. And now we've got this whole crowd of people that are sitting there like, shh, trying not to like spook this egret who's hunting this giant lizard. It's a big desert spiny lizard, and it caught it. And this lizard, you can see the look on its face. It knows it's cooked. It's done for. The egret was pretty excited, and we sat there and we watched it down the lizard, and then we made our flight. miraculously. But pretty fun moment to catch, and definitely wouldn't have gotten this if we weren't in the right place at the right time. Uh, Blue jays are one of my biggest nemesis birds. They're a smart bird, and we see them all the time. You probably think it's a really common bird because it is a really common bird. They really don't like me. They run away from me all the time, and it seems like the harder I try to hide from them, the more suspicious they are of me. Like I'm not fooling them, and they won't come anywhere near me. I have more luck when I'm just like, okay, I'm here. Are we gonna do this thing or not? And I still haven't gotten a good photo of a blue jay in Texas. This was in Florida. I was visiting my mom, and I went to the park that I basically grew up at and played soccer at and went to school across the street from. And I took a little walk around the pond looking for something to shoot. And I saw some blue jays, and I thought, well, here we go, of course. And I walked up and I tried to get a picture of these blue jays. And I thought, what are they doing? They keep diving from this tree down to the ground and then back up to the tree. And I got close enough. And what was cool is they were so busy with whatever it was that they were doing that they didn't care about me. And I was able to get super close, and I got a whole bunch of great photos of them. This is a fun one and particularly unique because what they were doing was getting little frogs out of the grass and eating them. And I had no idea that blue jays were predatorial in that way. I thought maybe bugs. I know they love peanuts, and that's what I've tried to do to get them close to me. But these guys were eating frogs. I thought, wow, that's incredible. I never knew that they could or would do that. And I'm so lucky and proud to have captured that behavior. It's not something that I could have planned for. It's not something that gear would have helped me with. It's just something that I was very lucky to experience, and I'm proud to have captured it. Another lucky moment, we were leaving the Wildflower Center, and I love looking for roadrunners. And I hadn't seen any roadrunners this day. But as we were leaving, my wife was driving again. I should really always make sure she's driving because that's when these best moments always tend to happen. And she spotted the roadrunner and pointed it out. And she was kind enough to pull over and let me jump out of the car real fast. And so I sat on the curb and I tried to get a good shot. And this roadrunner, it was very funny. This is another one. I called it RR crossing, like roadrunner crossing, railroad crossing, because I'm super clever. And this one got into the Hill Country calendar this year. So another, I guess, a winner for me. I was really proud of this shot, and I thought that it was fun. You've got a bird with a mouth full of food. It's got a lizard and a caterpillar in its mouth, which I didn't know that they did. And it's waiting to cross the road. So it's actually standing effectively at a crosswalk, waiting to cross into Circle C into a neighborhood where I assume it maybe had a nest. Just a funny behavior, a cool moment, and a awesome photograph that I'm proud of. And I think it might be my wife's favorite photograph or one of them. So one other thing that gear can't give you is patience. You have to spend some time with your subject if you want to get to know it and you want to capture things that others wouldn't have captured. One example are these ghost crabs, these pallid ghost crabs in Hawaii. My wife and I were noticing them. We're fans of ghost crabs now. It's kind of a thing. And I kept seeing them coming out of their holes, and I'd try to bring up the camera, and they spook and run back into their hole. And there's no way to approach a ghost crab in broad daylight. You just got to wait. And so I laid there on my belly in the sand, and I waited. And I got this shot of the crab coming out. And I just like how much it shows off the camouflage of the crab. I mean, these little grains of sand, that's natural sand in Hawaii, and you can see how well evolved and adapted these crabs are to the environment that they live in. I mean, it pretty much disappears into the photograph, and that's really fun to me. But I wouldn't have gotten it if I didn't have the patience to sit there and wait. And it was very boring for me, and it was very fun for my wife because she likes sitting and waiting and reading on the beach. And I had to just kind of lay there bored until I got this awesome opportunity. Another cool opportunity, I set up a trail cam at Onion Creek Metropolitan Park in a super non-creepy way. I put it way, way, way off the trail, and I was definitely trying to capture animals. And I'm aware it was not my property. But I did. I got a whole bunch of cool trail cam photos and videos of deer, and I have a YouTube channel, and I'll kind of show you how to find that later. And I've posted a lot of the videos that I've gotten with this trail cam, both in Onion Creek Metro Park and now at my house out here in Cedar Creek, Texas. And I saw this coyote showing up, and these predators are kind of seasonal. I realized, at least on my trail cams, they are. So bobcats and the coyotes and the foxes, they like to show up when the weather's cold. And I had seen this coyote showing up on the camera, and it was the same time 3 days in a row. And I thought, I can be there at that time if I'm smart. And so I got there an hour early, and I sat and I waited, and I was bored, and the sun was going down, and it was starting to get dark. And I thought, sure, man, 3 days in a row, but not today. Okay, that's fine. And as I started to shift my weight to pick myself up, I turned my head, and there it was. It was just sitting there, and it was looking not even at me, just sort of in my general direction. And of course, my hands started shaking, and I was like, this is exactly what I was here for. And I got this shot. It was very special to me. This also was in the Hill Country Alliance calendar as kind of like an honorable mention, one of the smaller photos in the calendar. This is last year. And so again, sort of a winning photograph for me, and something that was really special to me. I think some folks don't like coyotes. Some folks probably see them more often than they want to. And I know when I was in Arizona, a guy kind of laughed at me when I told him I was proud of my coyote photo because he's bored of coyotes. He's gotten so many photos of them. There are a few great places that you can do that out there near Phoenix. And I didn't care. This was really cool. I loved this photo, and it took a lot of patience, and it took a little bit of planning, and it worked for me. And the gear couldn't do that for me. That had to be me. So one last constraint that I really want to talk about is expectations. And that's because your gear really shouldn't surprise you. But subjects definitely will. And some cases where I was surprised by subjects, this was a buck out at Onion Creek. And, photographers like to clean up busy, distracting backgrounds, but I wouldn't change this image at all because it reminds me of the moment, and that busy, distracting background reminds me exactly of the conditions that this photo was taken in. This buck chased does across a field that I was watching, but he was like a little too far away for me to get any kind of good shot on him. And so after he chased those does into the brush near the edge of the field, I decided I could change my position and try to catch them crossing. I knew kind of like where I was. I could maybe catch them crossing this trail if I got in a better spot. And I got over there and I saw, boop, there goes a doe, there goes a doe, there goes a doe. Okay, here we go. And I'm sitting there and I've got my lens. My arms are getting tired. My arms are shaking. And the buck never crosses. And I'm like, man, no way did he go in front of them. Like, we all know his role here. Like, he's chasing the girls. The girls are in front of him. So where's he at? So I walked up the trail a little bit and I looked into the woods. It was just the woods. There was no way to enter, it was just thick woods. And I looked in and there he is looking at me. And I was able to get this photo. And it was a tangled mess. I don't know if anybody's ever read like the children's story, like Brer Rabbit, where they get all like mixed up in the briar patch and it's all nasty and thorns. That was the kind of thicket that this buck was in. I have no idea how they get their antlers through these things, like no clue. And silently as well, pretty remarkable. But I got a shot that I was satisfied with. And, the fact that I had just seen such a beautiful buck go by without getting a great shot made me want to get up and take a chance. So I got up, I took a chance, and the result was a much closer encounter, than I expected in the first place. And it's a fun photo for me. This is another fun one that I did not expect in my wildest dreams. I was out, and it's not a fantastic photo. I definitely look back on this and think, man, if only the conditions were better. But then I remember, dude, you saw a porcupine at the Wildflower Center. And that was the cool part of this photo. We walked a little bit off trail. I am naughty at the Wildflower Center, and I will walk a little off trail. And if I see a sign that says, don't go this way, I won't go that way. I'll find another way that I can go where there's not a sign. That way I don't feel like I broke the rules, and I will walk a little ways off trail at the Wildflower Center. This was one of those days, and I saw what looked like a beaver. Is that a beaver? What is that? It was way, way up in front of me. I thought, what is that thing? And porcupine was not registering in my brain even a little bit. I had to get close enough to positively ID it through the camera. And then I thought, this is incredible. I had my wife with me. I'm like, that's a porcupine. That's a porcupine. And I think we had like 4 or 5 deer that we also spooked as I'm approaching this porcupine. And normally that would be exciting to me. I could care less about the deer. I'm like, go on later. This is awesome. And so I got pretty close to this porcupine. If you've ever encountered a porcupine, this is the only time I've ever done it. They're pretty chill. I mean, they're pretty slow. I didn't really spook this thing. He did ultimately notice me and then wander off into the woods, and it slowly wandered away from me. But it did give me a little glance back, and I was able to get the face, and I was really happy about that because that's a special moment for me, and I will never forget it. And I felt like, how many people have seen a porcupine at the Wildflower Center? I don't know, but I am one of them, and that was great. This is another fun photo. It was just a cool opportunity. Not my favorite barred owl photo that I have. I'm fortunate to have gotten a few good ones, but it is a good photo, and I like the photo. And I was lucky to have gotten this photo. I wasn't paying any attention in this situation to this owl. I didn't even know it was there. I was on a kayak, and I have some kayak fishing buddies here in Texas, and I often have my camera instead of my pole out. And then they all tell me like, oh man, sorry you didn't catch anything today. And I'm like, I caught plenty, dude. I got like 400 frames today. So don't worry about me. And in this particular moment, I was shooting something. I noted it here. What was it? I was looking at this little it was a thrush. It was a thrush near the bank. It was a bird. It was uncommon enough that I was excited to see it, and I was like, okay, cool. I mean, I would paddle over to the bank, and I'm taking these photos of this thrush, right? And I had these young men come paddling behind me. They were Boy Scouts, and they were in canoes, 2 per canoe. And there was a group of them, and one of the guys on the canoe shouted out to me and said, hey man, there's an owl above your head. And I was like, what do you mean there's an owl above my head? And his buddy is like, shh, dude, leave him alone. He's like, what do you mean leave him alone? He has a camera. He's like, he doesn't care if there's an owl. Of course he cares if there's an owl. He has a camera. Why wouldn't you want to know that there's an owl? So they're arguing back and forth with each other, and they continued to argue as they paddled away from me. And I still hadn't found the owl. I'm still sitting there kind of spinning in circles looking for this thing. And the reason I couldn't find the owl was because I'm looking way up in the tree, and this thing was like here. It was very close to me. It was probably about 15, 20 feet above me. And I took this photo. I think this was at like 100 millimeters on a 100 to 500 millimeter lens. So I had to like zoom all the way out just to get like a good full bird in frame sort of shot. And he's right above me looking down at me. So just a really cool moment, one that I didn't expect, and it surprised me. And I have gone back to this spot because now I live out in this area. At the time I was on the water, but now I find this same owl when I walk around on the trails down at the Bastrop County Nature Park. So just neat and cool to have this story to go with it. I'm getting close to the end here. Something just to mention, we are all aware of ISO and noise. And I just want to use that as an opportunity to talk about personal boundaries, because this is my personal boundary. I don't use ISO artistically. I don't use grain artistically. And it's a personal choice. I don't like it in my photos. It's something that I see other people do and do beautifully. And so this, I think, is a good example of how you get to make your decisions and you get to form your style, and your personal choices create the results that you get. If I were to have a lot of grain in a photo that I shared, it would probably be because I saw something like this, like a Bigfoot or a Loch Ness monster, and I'm literally just trying to capture proof of the thing that I saw. That's when you'll see me post like a really grainy photo online, but I haven't seen Bigfoot yet, or the Loch Ness monster, or the chupacabra. And so you probably won't find a lot of grainy or noisy photographs from me. There are, I just go, yeah, there are other constraints. I think, as I mentioned at the beginning, like post processing software is a constraint depending on what you use and how proficient you are with it. And like I said at the beginning, I'm a very lazy post processor. I had to become a lazy post processor. I started out being a very dedicated post processor, and it ruined photography for me for a little bit because I would take 5,000 photos and then have to call those photos, which was devastating. And then I would have to go and start editing photos, and it took so much time that I just thought, like, why bother? And I don't even know why I go out and shoot. So I had to come up with a better way. And now post processing, I probably spend about a minute on a photo. I have a couple presets that I realized I was doing the same thing over and over. And as I started to develop a personal style, it became easier to recreate that quickly. And so now post processing is not such a chore to me. And other things that come to mind, like travel budget, how much can you get around? I learned that I love Texas wildlife. I had to fall in love with Texas wildlife. At first, I was like so excited when I got into wildlife photography, like, oh, I'm going to go to Panama and I'm going to go all over the world and I'm going to shoot all this cool exotic wildlife. And what I realized when we went to, I think Hawaii is when I had this realization, is like you spend so little time on vacation with those animals and you get maybe some cool shots and proof that you saw them, but not so much like cool artistic shots. And you don't really build as much of a relationship with those subjects. And I fell in love with Texas wildlife because I spent so much time with them. And now I've caught behaviors and I've seen things that not everybody gets to see. And so I realized that even the constraint of not being able to travel all the time, because I'm not a multimillionaire that can spend my life on the road and on planes and all over the world, I'm happy to have the travel that I have. And I'm really happy to spend the time with the animals that I have around me here at home. Similar, access to special places and subjects. The weather is a constraint. And hopefully over the course of this, I've made you think a little bit, and you're probably thinking about some constraints that you face that I haven't mentioned at all. And there are many, many more constraints. The takeaway that I hope you have from this is just that constraints in photography, they present us with opportunities to interpret subjects in unique ways and to observe and make creative choices to capture beauty that is often overlooked and to feel a great sense of pride in overcoming challenges. And of course, gear matters. And altering your constraints with a new lens, for example, will open new opportunities to push your creative boundaries. But gear is not what matters most because all gear still has limitations. And so, what matters most is our unlimited capacity as humans to recognize meaning and beauty in our surroundings and the freedom to respond with in personal expressions of our own. And that is what I see as creativity. And I think that is it from me. So thank you all for coming. And you can find me on Instagram at Wight Wildlife, on X at Wight Wildlife, on Facebook at Wildlife Bro, on YouTube at Wildlife Bro, and at wildlifebro.com. That's it.
All right. Michael, this was wonderful. I love, so I think we approach Texas wildlife the same way. I spend a lot of my time in South Texas. That's kind of where I grew up. Um, I like to take the photo of the animal. This is how I got it. I don't need to go in there and clean up. I grew up in brush country, right? So everything is a tangled mess and there's just no way to clean it up. So when you're flipping through these and kind of saying the same things that go through my head the way I shoot, I was like, yes, yes, yes. So I love that so very much. You kind of made me feel a little bit better about um, you get the animal the way you get the animal. That is a gift. It's a gift that we get to see these things. Um, One, I didn't know porcupines were in Austin, Texas, so I kind of need to go to the wildflower center now. This was a wonderful presentation. I love the stories. I want to shout out to your wife. Somebody, I think it was Todd that said, the ultimate wingman. We always Don't always give credit to our drivers or the person that our spotters, because my mom is often my spotter and she can catch things I don't see. So shout out to the misses there. So congratulations on a wonderful presentation. Thank you for coming. Thank you for sharing. I'm going to roll through here real quick because oh, okay. I was looking for questions. One just popped up from Todd, and I think you know Todd, but he wants to know what keeps you shooting. You've overcome many obstacles in the field and your dislike of the post. What keeps you going?
Yeah, man. I mean, I love being in the woods with animals. And really, the camera gives me a closer look at things that I love to watch and observe. So that's what keeps me
Mhm.
shooting. I think that I almost feel compelled to share things when I see something cool and I just really, really want other people to see it. I tried for a year last year. I tried to post every day. I did post every day and it wore me out. I felt like I was spending my time thinking about what other people were going to want to see and worrying about getting likes and worrying about getting follows. And now I don't care.
Yep.
I'm not trying to be famous. I just something that I think is a really key takeaway here, and I think sorry for rambling, but this I think is really the real answer. Uh, I tried for a while to get attention, from strangers. Like, oh yeah, I just want people to see my work and say it's really cool and get like a million likes on stuff. And it was boring and soul sucking. And
Mhm.
instead, I've shifted my focus. Now, that I have like a few thousand followers on Instagram, and I was so proud of that. And now I am bored about posting on Instagram. I get really excited about posting in like Central Texas birds on Facebook because these are
Mhm.
local people. They're people that I've
Yep.
met. I've met
Yep.
some of you in the room, and I hope to meet more of you in the room. And it's having a community and friends and people to share this stuff with that care about it as much as I do has meant a lot more than getting likes on Instagram. And so now that's a big part of what keeps me shooting is having something to talk about with the friends that I've made.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to make sure you see this chat because it was a very active chat tonight and nothing but kind words. Michael, I want to thank you for, I don't know how I talked you into this. I don't think I had to talk you into it. I think you were like, yeah, I want to do
I
it.
could tell you.
So, okay, please tell
We
me because I don't remember.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't
Yeah, no, I could
remember.
tell you. We met at the festival and a talk had just ended and I had seen Todd. So I walked up to talk to Todd because he was the only friend I recognized in the room and
Okay.
we were talking and then Todd introduced me to his friends around him and you were one of them. And I think you asked me like, was I having a good time? Was it neat? And I said, yeah, this is so cool. And you're like, would you like to speak about something? I was like, I mean, I don't even know what I would speak about. And you're like, you'll figure it out. Let's do it. And I was like, okay, all right, let's do it. When's good? And you're like, I'll reach out to you. And you did. And then you're like, how's February? And I'm like, it's March. We missed February. And you're like, no, February 2026. And I was like, wow, you're booked out for the whole year. That's fantastic. Sure, let's do it. It gives me a year to come up with something to talk about. And here we are.
Wow. You have a very good memory because I'm like, Todd who? No, I know who Todd is. All right, let me get you to take your screen down. Thank you for coming and sharing because these are the talks that I really enjoy the most. You're local, you're shooting things that I recognize, and you go to the places that are accessible to me. So people come to Texas. We'll take you out. We'd love to have you. All right,
Yeah,
Michael.
absolutely. And my last word here is like you can find me on these things, but don't find me there just to look at the stuff that I share. I really do appreciate the attention, but I really do appreciate friends more. And so you can find me in these places and reach out to me and let's hang out. I've hung out with Todd. I've hung out with Mika. I met Mika before I even knew who Mika was, accidentally because I was out volunteering, doing some trail cleanup, and she was out there taking photos of herps. Um, I want to make more friends and I want to go on hikes. I love going outside and I love showing people around and I'd be happy to share stuff with you and I'd love to learn stuff from you as well. So
All
let's hang
right.
out.
I love that. Thank you, Michael. All right. Next week, Mitch Korolev will be here to share his presentation, Blending Inspiration and Information when Photography Meets Science. You guys have a nice night, and we'll see you next week.